Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. One of the most important things for a prepper to be able to do is cook, because if you can do that, then you can prepare food and you can also boil water to help purify it. And there's a lot of good off-grid cooking methods out there. Things like gas grills and propane camp stoves are things that most people already have that would be very useful during short-term emergencies. For longer-term situations, things like rocket stoves and Kelly kettles would be good to have, since they don't rely on fuel sources that'll eventually run out. All you need to keep them running is sticks or other natural materials, and then solar cookers only need the sun. However, one major pitfall of all of those methods is that they need to be used outside. Bad weather could prevent you from being able to do that, and if we're in a really serious situation, then security could be a concern. Smoke and odors produced by cooking can alert people to your location and let them know that you have something that they may want. Because of these reasons, every prepper should have the ability to cook indoors if needed. Being able to do that will give you more options during a longer term situation, and it'll also make shorter term emergencies a little bit more convenient. One of my favorite off-grid cooking methods is a butane stove, and there's a few reasons for this. First, they're the closest thing to a regular stovetop that you can get, and in some cases they may actually be more powerful than your electric stovetop. For example, my butane stove is rated for 10,000 BTU, and there's a lot of electric stovetops. Their burners are only rated for around 7,000. This means that you'll be able to cook anything on them that you would on your regular stove. You can boil large pots of water or even use a grill pan to cook different kinds of meat. Just be sure that the pot doesn't hang over the edge where the fuel can is, because that could cause an explosion, which we all know, of course, is bad. Another reason that I like butane stoves is that they tend to be a little bit cheaper than other portable stoves. You can still go into some big box stores and pick up a butane stove for around $30, and then also their fuel cans are pretty inexpensive. Like, I've been able to find these locally for less than $3. Then you can get dual fuel stoves that run on both butane and propane. I don't have one of those just because I have this stove and I have a couple of propane stoves, so it's not really something that I need. But if you're somebody who's just getting started out and you don't have anything, or you're somebody who's short on space and wants the ability to use both, then they're very good to have, because fuel redundancy is never a bad thing. Another good thing about butane is that it tends to be a little bit safer to use indoors than propane, since it burns cleaner. But even though I really like butane stoves, they do have a couple of drawbacks. First off, their fuel cans, they can be a little bit difficult to find, so they're definitely something that you want to stock up on ahead of time. And then also, butane is temperature sensitive. Like, it won't vaporize at temperatures 31 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. So if you're going to be using those in the winter months, you really do need to protect your cans from those low temperatures. And even though butane is considered safer than propane for indoor use, you still need to take some basic precautions. Be sure that you set up your stove far away from any flammable materials like paper or curtains, and always have a fire extinguisher nearby. Also, have battery operated smoke and carbon monoxide alarms, and check the batteries in them regularly. Then, if possible, cooking next to a cracked window can help those fumes dissipate a little bit better, but keep in mind, if there's a security concern, then that smell from whatever you're cooking will go out the window as well. And all these are things that you want to remember regardless of the cooking method that you're using. Accidental fires and carbon monoxide poisonings increase when people are using backup cooking, lighting, and heating methods, and being proactive is the best way to help prevent those things. Another indoor safe cooking method that I really like is an alcohol burner. These work well for boiling small amounts of water or for heating up canned goods. Because of their size, they're not going to be able to cook everything that a butane stove would be able to. But on the other hand, they're also very portable, so you can use them at home or as part of a kit, like a bug-out bag or get-home bag. One big advantage the alcohol stoves have is that they can use multiple fuel options. Denatured alcohol is considered by many to be the best, and you can find this in several different sizes at places like big box stores, at hardware stores. I picked up a gallon jug of it a while back, and that should last me for a while. Yellow Heat is an alcohol-based fuel additive that can also be used in one of these, and you can find it in big box stores, hardware stores, stores and even gas stations. Alcohol stoves can also run on isopropyl alcohol, although it'll deposit more soot on the bottom of your cooking container than many of the other fuels. But you can reduce that by applying a little bit of dish soap to the bottom of your cooking container. Then these can also run on Everclear, although that'll probably be a little bit more expensive than some of the other options. A fuel bottle like this one will make your stove a lot easier to fill up, but you never want to add fuel to an alcohol stove while it's hot. If you do that, the alcohol could ignite as it's being dispensed, so always wait for one of these to cool down and don't try to fill it as it's burning. Then when using an alcohol stove, you're going to need a way to suspend a pot or other container above it. You could rig up something at home for this purpose, but the easiest way to do it is to just use some sort of backpacking stove. The firebox is a popular option since it's height adjustable and can be set up to handle different kinds of cooking containers, from small camp cups all the way to larger pots. It can also use a variety of man-made and natural fuel sources, and it's very durable. The Solo Stove Lite is similar to the firebox in that it can use an alcohol stove or natural materials, but it isn't as customizable, which could be a bad thing or a good thing. Pretty much anybody can take one of these out of the box and then figure out how to use it, whereas with the firebox there's a lot of different configurations to figure out. The Solo Stove Lite can also hold an alcohol stove inside of it when it's packed up, but it doesn't fold up flat like the firebox does. Then a canteen or bottle cook set can be used with an alcohol stove. This one by Pathfinder comes with a stainless steel water bottle, a camping cup with lid, and then a stove that you can set over the top of your alcohol burner. And any of those methods can be used both indoors or outdoors. Just be sure to put them on a stable surface that won't get burned, because the stove can get pretty hot. I found that placing a cookie sheet on top of some pot holders does a good job protecting countertops and tables. I would, however, be careful when trying to use some of the more budget options when it comes to backpacking stoves. This is the first one that I got. It was really difficult to put together and take apart, and then also the top of it started to sag underneath the heat. Then this one, which is designed more for canned fuel, had a problem with the paint burning off and producing some pretty nasty fumes. So at a minimum, I would stick with something with non-painted stainless steel with thicker gauge metal. Another indoor cooking method that you can use that's similar to an alcohol burner is sterno or canned heat, also known as chafing fuel. These are commonly used to keep food warm at catered events or potlucks, so you've probably seen them being used indoors already. The gel inside of them is alcohol based, so they behave similar to alcohol when they burn, but they won't work nearly as fast as an alcohol stove will. They can also be used with different backpacking stoves. Just be sure that these cans will fit down inside of whatever you're using. Another thing that you can use to cook indoors is candles, although you won't be able to do nearly as much with them as you would with a butane or alcohol stove. Even though they produce an open flame, that flame is a lot smaller and less powerful than the jets on something like a butane stove or alcohol stove. So really just think of them as a way to heat things up while giving yourself a little bit extra light. You can forget about boiling water with them, but they do work well for heating up things like canned soup or chili, and then also small amounts of water to make things like instant coffee. The most common way that you'll see people cook with candles is to group several of them together and place a cooking container over the top of them. Unfortunately, that isn't the safest thing to do, because if that wax gets bumped, it could cause a flash fire similar to a grease fire, and those can be very problematic, especially if you're not expecting it. The safest way to use candles for cooking is to use a candle lantern like this one. It holds 3 candles and has a plate at the top that can support a small metal container. With one of those, the candles are far enough apart that there won't be any issues, and unlike tea candles, large amounts of melted wax don't pull up right underneath the flames. It drips down the side and resolidifies. The candles are also contained inside of the lantern, so that reduces the chance of them coming into contact with flammable materials or getting knocked over. Then you can also use oil lanterns for cooking. Like with candles, these won't be able to produce a whole lot of heat, but they can be decent multitaskers if you're already using them for light. So many of the same rules apply. Don't expect to cook anything big. Don't expect to be able to boil water, just use it to heat stuff up. In an earlier version of this video, I showed how to use an oven rack to suspend a cooking container above a tabletop oil lamp. However, there is a way to use a hurricane lantern for this purpose as well. This is the Dietz Millennium 2000. It's a regular oil lamp that's been modified to accept cookware on top. To use it, remove the top from the lantern and replace it with the cooking ring. Then light the wick, and when adjusting the height of that wick, be careful to avoid making it so tall that it starts to smoke. This burns up the wick faster, causes soot to collect on the bottom of your cooking container, and also that stuff just isn't good to breathe in. If you'll be using this or any other oil lantern indoors, you may want to use paraffin lamp oil instead of kerosene. While kerosene will burn brighter, it also produces more of an odor, which is something that you may not want inside of your home. The Millennium 2000 does come with its own cookware, but it isn't the best quality. It's super light aluminum and it's so lightweight that I was able to bend the bracket that holds the handles on with just my fingernail. Another YouTuber actually showed the container leaking from the rivet that holds that bracket in place. Thankfully though, it'll fit some of my other cooking containers like the steel cup from my Pathfinder bottle set. And poor construction quality is an issue with other parts of this lantern as well. The materials are kind of flimsy and in some cases they don't fit together all that well. For example, the burner here, it doesn't really line up with the slots on the base of the lantern, so it was a lot more difficult to put together than it should have been. And y'all, I've used oil lanterns before. I know how they work, and that was a lot more difficult than it should have been. Also, removing the globe and putting it back in was difficult, and I think the main reason for that was how the top plate fits on the rest of the lantern. It has these rounded indentations which are meant to hold it in place, but they don't really do a good job. As you pull up on it, it shifts, which causes the globe to not get the clearance that it needs. So overall, I think that this is a neat idea and it can work. It was just poorly executed in this case. Layman's has one that's similar by a different manufacturer, but I'm not really sure if it's all that much better. So this is probably just going to be used as a regular oil lantern rather than a cooking lantern. But if you're wanting something to heat up water or soup while providing a little light at the same time, I would just stick with a candle lantern. The candle lantern actually did a better job heating up water in my testing than the oil lantern did. And also, this is going to produce a lot less of an odor than an oil lantern will, and that's important if you have somebody in your family maybe who's sensitive to different kinds of fumes. Then another way that you can cook indoors during a blackout is to use a solar generator, although this is cheating a little because it uses electricity and it isn't really my favorite method. However, in a pinch, you can use one of these for cooking if you do it the right way, but first you need to understand which cooking methods work best. Crock pots do okay since they only use 200 or 300 watts, meaning you should be able to cook an entire meal using a 1 kilowatt hour power station. However, doing that's probably going to use up most of the battery capacity of a device like this. You can also use rice cookers, which are similar to a crock pot. They're just a little smaller. Microwaves are another option. These require more electricity at around 1200 watts, but they generally need to run for a much shorter period of time. You just need to understand that any appliance that heats things up is going to use a ton of electricity. So plan on getting a power station that's at least 1 kilowatt hour in capacity. That's going to give you enough energy to get the job done, but also, power stations of that capacity usually have an inverter that's going to be powerful enough to get some of those appliances started. But in my experience, solar power options are better used for other things, like preserving food in something like a box freezer or powering and recharging other important devices like lights. However, if you're desperate or need something that doesn't require a fuel source, then solar can get the job done. Just don't expect to be able to use it for anything else because cooking is going to use pretty much all the power you got. Then there's also ways to cook indoors that you may already have built into your home. If you have a gas stovetop, these will probably continue to work during short-term emergencies where you still have natural gas utilities. You may just need to use a lighter to get it started if your electronic ignition isn't working. Wood-burning fireplaces are another good option, and they've been used for this exact purpose for thousands of years. They're large enough to do pretty much anything in them that you may want to, and you can get different accessories for cooking different things. Like you can get grates for grilling, and you can get cranes for suspending a pot over a fire. But gas fireplaces are not considered safe to cook in due to toxicity concerns and the possibility of food and grease falling into the logs and damaging them. Wood stoves, though, are a similar option that can work well. Fireplaces and wood stoves are also effective at heating up your home, which could be good or bad depending on the season. It'd be great during the winter, but not so much during the summer. However, both of these would need to be built into a home, so a lot of people aren't going to have them. But if you do plan on building one day, they'd be very very good things to incorporate. Just be aware that both of those are going to produce a ton of smoke, which will be visible to people from the outside. And even though being able to cook indoors is important, having those methods should just be one part of a well-rounded cooking plan that can get you through both short-term and long-term disasters. So to see other cooking methods that you may want to have, check out this video, or if you want to see foods that you should be stockpiling, then check out this video. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.